Okay, so I am in the hot seat with the wonderful Ray Everest. We've just come over from Instagram Live, where we was discussing weightlifting, which is Ray's passion, and supporting females in this industry. And we was just talking about basically what I picked up, Ray, was mindset still around this idea of cutting weight and how it's still obviously so prevalent. But I mean, it's prevalent in all aspects of fitness, isn't it? Is this idea that to be smaller and leaner, well, leaner obviously is good for you, but this idea of losing weight and working with this deficit approach, which we now know is detrimental to our health. So, how do you, what's the toughest mindset? Is it the females that are coming in? Are they bringing this mindset with them, or is it that it's in that space, or is it a bit of both?
Oh, yeah, look, remember, social media is a massive driver of what people perceive to be success in their approach. Even I would open Instagram at points and look at guys and think, holy heck, I'm way out of shape. Um, but I think it, where it comes from is what we immerse ourselves in, right? What your environment and what you're looking and listening to and reading and things like that is a big driver of anyone's behaviors and attitudes. And so social media is a large portion of that sort of mindset. Um, and I think we've got to weigh up as well here. Genetics, there are some people out there that genetically their musculature comes through far easier, or also I also like to weigh in because I work with I have in the past and now work with Māori, so that's the we're the indigenous people of New Zealand. You know, we're big people. We're actually a big people. We're of Polynesian descent. You know, I remember my uncles, my mum's Māori. My uncles were short, stout kind of guys. They looked like Maori Gimlis off Lord of the Rings. If I put a big beard on them, they would have looked like these dwarfs. But they were built really solid and quite powerful powerful people. So they carry a little bit more fat, but man, they're just weapons. And we've obviously had some pretty prevalent All Blacks and things like that being Māori descent or Pacifica people. So. But in terms of the mindset, yeah, it's a hard one because a lot of our females in our sport today have come through CrossFit. They've probably signed up to CrossFit to look better naked, like I did, and we can't deprive people of that also, because they have gone in for a reason. So when they come across and I've convinced them to, because they've naturally shown a flair for the bar, and you're like, oh, come on, we could put you on a platform. If say for example, if they were sitting at some kind of 66 kilos, 65 kilos, and feeling confident in themselves, when I was suggesting for them to go up to 69, 71 kilos, all they saw was the number. And what I was suggesting, I wasn't probably articulating it good enough then. Well, all I was saying is, I don't want you to be at 71 kilos. I don't want you to cut to 63 kilos. I want you to stay where you are and compete in that weight class. I probably didn't articulate that good enough because all they were hearing was, go up. I need to put on 5 more kilos tomorrow, and I'm not comfortable with that. So that's where I've kind of grown as a coach. Because our sport, you naturally get bigger because you're pushing weights. If you're not on drugs, you naturally get bigger. The young athletes that take drugs and with steroids, performance enhancing drugs, they don't have to work as hard to maintain their strength levels. They still have to work hard, but not as hard. And generally, the muscle mass doesn't have to come on as much because they're not as frequently pulling and squatting, whereas
See that a lot with women, right? The women, the females. Do you see a lot with them taking steroids as well?
no, not in New Zealand, but overseas, absolutely. I mean, there's always in that space. I think that's probably cultural as well, because they are absolutely representing their livelihood. So to win medals is vital for them. But that's a whole nother conversation. But no,
Another,
no, and
yeah.
no, but in New Zealand itself, no, I haven't seen it, but we know that that's the kind of space that it lives in, and that the PEDs will, you don't have to keep up with, or you work as hard. You work as hard as a non-clean athlete, as a clean athlete, sorry, and your strength levels are way, 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 way past anyone
Yeah.
that a clean athlete could do. So yeah, that mindset around image, and as a coach, we can never discount the mindset around image, because that's someone's own perception of themselves and their confidence. We've got to coach them in that space. But you also have to, as a coach, you also have to draw a line. Like you can't, you can coach, but you can't convince. They have to convince themselves on it, and you can't get in a constant fight and battle and end up either disrespecting the athlete by saying things that you're selfish, or you're vain, anything like that. Not that I've ever said that, but um, you still must respect their own thoughts and feelings towards themselves, because that's something that our sport won't address. That's something that they have to address themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So with regards to coming back to the period, how hard have you found it to like initiate these women with it? I mean, have you had women come in and openly discuss it with you first off, or has it always been you?
No, it's always been me.
Mm.
Because it's not something you go up to your coach and talk about. I mean, it's not like, and this is potentially, and I don't know, I mean, this is potentially a societal thing, that females would not generally talk about their period um, to some random male that's only started in their life, because I have to bring it up right at the start. And I'm fine with doing it. And like I said, like a young girl, Medea, I coach, her mum and dad were there. I think it might have been a first session, and I just said straight out in front of them, right, team, I need to know about what you're like having a period. What's it? What goes on? And you could see she was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. She was a bit confronted, but I have to do it. It's the responsible thing to do. And we
Mm.
must make that clear to male coaches. It is the responsible thing to do. B, it is showing a piece of vulnerability. If you're asking an athlete to trust you with their performance and well-being, I think being vulnerable in that space and saying, hey, look, I want to ask you about something that I can never understand, and you
Mm.
need to help me understand that, is a big piece, a big tick for any male coach going in and working with females, or young and old. And I think largely that conversation, it's easier for me to come from my end, because it's just where I live in that value space around working with females.
I love it I love how you keep describing it as value. Like the menstrual cycle and period has so much value. It's so refreshing to hear this, especially in this industry where we're still kind of a little bit behind. So how do you create a plan for your female athletes? Are they pretty similar, or are they unique for each individual?
Well, they spend a lot of time together, and generally their period ends up being pretty close to one another. And the conversation is pretty open and honest. We generally, which is general from weightlifting cycles anyway, we generally operate in a kind of 3 week on, 1 week tapered type approach. But for example, Haley, I know going into her period, her performance wise is not very good. She bleeds heavily. So you don't want to go and start throwing heaps of heavy squats and cleans and
Yeah.
It's not a nice. I can only imagine it's not a nice space to be in. But then but Haley and I've been working together for a long time now. So she will just say, "Oh, I've got my period," and this, and we just like, "Cool, we just take it back." That's how we adapt. So we adapt on the fly because that's what I'm talking about, right? Is that conversation? Because I do know once Haley's in her period and she's got it, and it goes like that. It goes up. It like just flies. Her performance wise. So I know the other end of it. So my kind of approach is just around that conversation again. But we've got such a great relationship, Samara and I as well, and things that it's as normal as what we're doing right now. The
Yeah.
normality's there, it's again, like you say, it's part of our values in terms of the coaching athlete relationship. So it yeah, it's just we just talk. That's a good
It's
thing.
one it's amazing. I really was into the CrossFit a few years back, when it first hit. It was just it felt phenomenal. When you lift that weight, it's just and my big thing is I think that young women should have the opportunity and be inspired to lift weights and learn martial
Yes,
arts because you learn what this body is all about. You learn what
yes,
you're capable of. You can feel your power and your strength. And I see so many disenchanted young women walking around, and they're just a
yes,
bundle of emotions because they just
yes,
don't know how to hold it in this body. Um,
yeah.
how has this impacted perhaps your male athletes? Has it had any impact at all?
Oh, yeah. So at present, I'm not coaching. I've got a pretty small team now, just 'cause I'm pretty busy with my own family and my business and things like that. But in the past, I had to model. I think where it comes down to is I model it. It's not like I'm sitting in a corner talking to the girls about their period away from them,
Yeah.
or hiding. It was a model and a conversation around those sorts of things, that it is normal, that it deserves respect. You know, under the underlying feelings that they get, we cannot ever know. We don't know what that feels like. So it's not a place to form opinion on. Oh man, they're just copping out of training, or they're just that is not our place to do and be. And so with the males that have been in there before with me, when they hear those conversations, I would like to think that they've probably it was awkward for them at the start as well, especially young men.
Yeah.
But I've just hoped to normalise the conversation around that sort of stuff. And look, there's obviously a long way to go with males and coaches and females. But if we don't open these convos up, because females, like take for example, the Olympics have just been like 6 of the 7 gold medals New Zealand won were females. We, in terms of a high performance space in weightlifting alone, females are far outperforming males. In terms of women being involved in the Olympics, and in weightlifting in general, it's nowhere near as long as men. Yet they are breaking far more records than males, at a faster rate. And like take for our own sport here, we just had a major event here. I think there's 160 athletes, and I think it was either 92 or 97, I can't remember, of them were female.
Wow.
It's strength sports, and I'm not just talking about weightlifting. I'm talking about powerlifting. I'm talking about, and that was a weightlifting event, but I'm talking about in powerlifting, strong man or strong woman, um, all those events. Yeah, martial arts, MMA, those sorts of things. We are seeing huge trends in women taking those sports up, and being able to normalize their normal piece of life, which is their period. This is the vital cog to it, as in any sort of coach. But a lot of the coaches are male. They are,
Mm.
because males have dominated this sport in the past. So we have to have those conversations. have to just have to have them.
Do you think, where do you think we are right now with regards to really, I hate the word harness, it's not harnessing, it's having these conversations like you said, and bringing the awareness to it, but where do you think we are with the period in fitness, and how do you see us getting this message out there, and for women to really start taking this on? Because what I see a lot of is we're starting to, over in the UK, we're starting to open the conversation, but women find it very hard to let go of the way of training that they've done, which they've reinforced for such a long time, to come and start doing it in a more cyclical way, and it just seems like almost too much.
Yeah, that's a good question. As a male, what I can do is what I'm doing now is exactly what I'm doing now, having a chat to you about this sort of stuff. That again, I go back to that vulnerability piece. Engaging that conversation with any female around their period, engaging it as a coach, as a male coach, is a big tick in any female's thing, because in their box, because what we're trying to say to them is, please help me. I know you get this once a month. I'm assuming you get it once a month. Sorry, it's probably the best way to say that. I don't know for how long. I don't know how you experience it. And I'm also about to throw a tough sport on top of you getting your period to measure up to your goals. So that's probably that vulnerability piece is just super important in that space. Well, I think though that the real leaders need to be in that space, is we need to empower our female athletes, and we've been lucky in our weightlifting community. So we had Megan Signal, who I really admire. She went to the Olympics. She was actually trying to make it to the Olympics as a 64 kilo athlete, and she was cutting all the time. She's pretty jacked. She's been to the CrossFit Games and the teams event and many regionals, and now she's made the switch to weightlifting. And she did the initial qualifiers were as a 64 kilo lifter, and she just wasn't getting a period and all that sort of stuff. And she just came out and owned it, and she really led the way for our sport in that space. Talking about it's not healthy to not have your period. If you're not receiving your period for extended periods of time, excuse the pun, sorry, for extended time, that's not good. Your body needs to do this. It needs to happen. Leading conversations like that is where we can really start to change the tune. And so she went up to 71, ended up competing as a 76, but I don't think she weighed anywhere near 76 in that space. But you know what I mean? She was one of our top lifters, leading a conversation around periods, weight cuts, all those sorts of things. So from within already there, we've got a shining light around this conversation. One of the girls I coach, Hayley, she's an outstanding athlete and a big figure within our community. And she's the same. She pushes that all the time. I convinced her to go up to the 87 class because she's quite tall, and she sits around 83. She hasn't weight cut in 3 years, 2.5 years. So she gets to go into every competition, eating what she wants in terms of volume of foods. If she has got her period in those times, she can eat things to help with her gut and how it's feeling and things like that. And we're just seeing a happier athlete. And I think that's important, right? Like, we unfortunately in the last couple of weeks, a New Zealand cyclist, young girl, 24, Liv Podmore, took her life. And yeah, if we're not moving towards happier athletes, if that's not an indication of an athlete being deeply unhappy, then we are failing as coaches and as sports in general. And these conversations around their period and menstrual cycle and things like that, they add to the mental health aspect of any female athletes. We must do what we can to ensure our athletes actually enjoy the bloody sport,
Yeah.
and the process. And if part of that conversation is around moving up a body weight class so they're not cutting weight all the time and putting all this pressure on themselves, then we've got to do it. End
Yeah.
of story, right? It's the
Yeah.
responsible thing to do.
And but it's being in, like you say, it's being in the environment that wants you to thrive as you. And you know what you describe as your space sounds phenomenal. You know, you're there, you want the conversation. It's fine to talk about. There's no stigma, no nothing, but still this antiquity and out of date way of approaching female fitness is still there. And in some
Yeah.
places, it's quite a hard nut to crack, isn't it?
I think if you were to talk, I mean, they have said this to me, and maybe it's good. It would be worthy having a chat with Hayley and things like that.
Mm.
I still think females are the hardest on females. In my opinion, in my interactions, it has been females that have said things like, "Oh, no, I wouldn't want to put that much weight on. Oh, no, I don't want to do that sort of stuff. Oh, no, I don't want to look that way. Oh, it's females. It's
Mm.
females, and that's hard for me to address being a male, because going backwards, going back to what I was saying, we must respect people's own beliefs of themselves and what they value, whether we agree with it or not. We must respect it because it's their values and it's their. It's hard though. It is hard. It's hard for me to hear if they're disrespectful towards it, like they're saying, "Oh, I don't want to look like Hayley," then I would say something, of course. But when they're saying when the conversations from females is still, "Oh, I wouldn't want to be that big. Oh, I don't want to look that bulky. Oh, I don't want that much muscle." Blah 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 blah. I know that we've still got a long way to go. A long way to go. That's. I've got two daughters, and they're young. They're 6 and 4, but I dread to think what social media will be when they are older,
Mm.
because it really drives and reinforces um, these belief systems around what a person should look like,
Mm.
aesthetically. And don't get me, like, I know people that have been, in that kind of figure space and or been high level CrossFit athletes, or I know people, women who have been in great rugby players and things like that. But are we, I guess the question is, are those women outliers from general community in terms of just Gen Pop saying, "I don't want to look like that," because their own social, their own stigma or what it's all attached to themselves has just been so ingrained.
Mm.
Yeah, so I find that space challenging. That I do believe, in my experience, it has been more females that have been far more brutal in terms of, "I don't want that. I wouldn't look like that," than males.
Mm.
You if males see Hayley, and often we go and train in different places, and Hayley and Samara and Medea will be training, and male athletes will step back and be in full awe. Especially they're from across a different sport. Like we're lucky enough to train at the Adams High Performance Centre here in Mount Maunganui in Tauranga, here where I live, and it's the home of New Zealand Sevens, and they're just obviously the women have just won the Olympic gold, and the men are Olympic silver medalists. And some of those boys are there, and they see our girls training. They're like, "Whoa!" They admire. They're like, "Wow! I wish we could do that." It's often what's said. So when you see a high level athlete in another sport going, "Wowee," and the girls too, you're just like, okay, so where is this all coming from? And it is generally Gen Pop that I see are the most harsh on that, and drive home those stink feelings of, oh, you need to look a certain way.
There's nothing harder than a woman being hard on herself. It is just, it is that mentality, especially when it comes to fitness, you know. And I question whether it's that deeply ingrained trying to compete with the males to try and be better than, and this is where we've lost it, isn't it? Because it's not about being better than, it's about, my thing is about celebrating our differences. Our physiology is different. Let's really embrace that, and let's learn about each other. You know, the way I see this is that the more that we discuss the period, the more that we can open up and discuss what actually is it to be healthy for a male. You know, what the conversation for both of us, because is it what we've been told for both the sexes? Well, we know for women, not necessarily, and we're opening that up now. But I think the reason why I got so deeply into the period side of things, because like you just said, I've got a little boy and a little girl, and I don't want my son growing up being afraid to open a door for a female and for her to be abusive back because she doesn't know who she is. And this is my belief, in that when a woman understands her body and she knows what it's made of, capable of, and what it needs, you've got a confident woman there. You've got a confident human, and she can communicate what she needs effectively, unemotionally, to the opposite sex. And now we can open this conversation. And you as a male, you can tell me, how do you feel? You know, it's that this is what I found all through body work. You know, all through body work is this not better, but a more open way of communicating. And I see that when you lift the bar and when you're lifting weights with a community of people, there's just this, I don't know, it's, words can't describe it. It's, you're there together, aren't you? And I think that was one of the biggest things about CrossFit, is that, all right, you're really smashing it out, but you're usually with a team or a partner, and they've got your back, and you're all in this together. And that's the wonderful thing.
Well, our sport, we all compete in the same type scenario. You know, there's a chalk bucket and a 4x4 platform, no matter what level of competition you're competing in, right? Whether it's the Olympics or club comp, we all have to compete on a 4x4, and we all have a chalk bucket that's right next to the platform. That's the beauty of our sport. We can replicate the Olympics in the club comp, because the intensity that a beginner feels is exactly the intensity that an elite athlete feels, because it's all relative. You know, I think that's where we have an advantage in our sport, is that we all go and compete by ourselves as an individual on that 4x4. Of course, the weights are different, but the sensation of, you know, and I was amazed to hear there was an interview with he's the super Olympic champion, Alasha Talakadze from Georgia. There was a very cool interview with him, and even he said, "Oh, the first snatch terrifies me." This guy hasn't missed a lift internationally. He hasn't missed a lift in 6 years. But to hear him say, "Oh, the first snatch terrifies me," we can all relate to that, because that's what we feel. So that's the beauty of our sport, right? It's all relative, but there's still the same level of fear and anxiety around it. So that's a strength, and a strength we've got to use, that we are on the same plane in terms of that space. But what we have to do is just continually grow those discussions about female performance in strength sports, because there's not a lot of research out there. There's not. Well, there's literally bugger all, in terms of extended, you know, longitudinal studies. There's nothing. It's all been done on males, and that's Stacey's thing, right? That women are not small men. That's probably been the biggest piece to the growth within our own systems here, is Stacey's kind of mantra around that sort of stuff. So yeah, the fitness industry is an interesting one, because if you go into any sort of global gym today, you will notice that majority of females, will sit on the kind of cardio machines, and the males will be in the weights area. And that's, I think, is the indication that we're not doing well. We're not doing well, right? There are women still trying to get tiny, and there are men trying to get bigger. And I'm talking about that on both sides. There are women going through their own struggles trying to get smaller, and there are men going through their own struggles trying to get bigger. You know, and if that's not a snapshot of society and mental health, I don't know what is. Because they're trying to create an image of that they've seen or believe is the most aesthetically pleasing to the opposite sex, or the into the who they're sexually interested in, or I am fascinated when I go into a normal gym like that and see that, because I'm just like, wow, we're getting nowhere. We've got nowhere in this space.
Yeah. I hear you. Do you know what, Ray? I could sit and talk to you all bloody night. But to bring this to a close, what advice would you like to give the women out there, women that may not have lifted before but would love to start, women that are already lifting? What words of wisdom would you like to offer these awesome humans?
I think if you're trying to get into lifting, my advice is to open up this discussion with the coach around your own fears and insecurities around this space. You know, we can't help you as a coach if we don't know, you know, what exists in that space. So open up that discussion. Find people who know what the hell they're doing. You know, social media is important. You know, generally people will have some, if they're a coach of some description, they'll have some sort of social media around them. If they, you'll know if they work with lots of females, they're generally probably clued up around what's going on in that space, hopefully. And I think the largest piece when it comes down to it is you'll find that the barbell is one of the most liberating pieces of sports equipment in the world, because it is just, you know, it's just not expected of you. And isn't that exciting? Isn't that exciting to go and pick up something that is about it's not expected? Isn't that the most exciting thing we could go and do, is go and pick up something that people don't expect us to do? Whether it might be, and it might, you know what, it might be your own father, it might be your brothers. They might not expect it, and to pick up a barbell and feel liberated because you're doing something that's still crazily in 2021 against societal norms, then I encourage you to go do it, because that's how I want to live my life, is making sure I'm not doing the same as what everyone else is doing. And that's why I'm having this conversation with you today, aren't I? You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exceptional life. That is what it's all about, an exceptional life. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ray, darling, thank you so much for joining me. And for anyone watching, if you've got any comments or any questions, I'm going to put Ray's details on there. Please check him out. He's an absolute legend. And it's a pleasure.
Yeah, and please reach out. I'm always open. You know, I've got my Instagrams open. If you want to message me, I'm always taking, thanks to Stacey as well. You know, like a lot of females have messaged me from all around the world being like, hey, really love that conversation. I'm always open to talking. Abby, I would suggest like getting on with Hayley. Hayley's actually she's just a great advocate in that space around this. She's a good sort. She's a good talker. She's intelligent. She's a very good looking girl. You know, all those things.
I won't wear my pajamas when I talk to Hayley then.
Yeah. But you know, I think she's part of our family. My wife and I, we love Hayley like another daughter for us, and my two daughters love her. But she's a great example of that. And she's got a pretty open Instagram as well. So people, if you Hayley Whiting's her name, if you want to message her and talk to her, she's always open for that sort of stuff too. Yeah, but it's about starting the conversation.
It is, and keeping it going. I love it. Thank you, Ray, my darling. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. All right.